Hi everyone and welcome to a new video on the CBI channel. In this tutorial series we're creating a Django and React dashboard application in which users can see the data of the database displayed in various types of charts. This is not the first video in this series. In fact, we've already done 6 before, in which we've completed the initial setup of Django and React. We've created a nice looking navigation menu and database models and added also some data to our project. And I showed you how to bring data from the backend to the front end and how to visualize it inside of a Material UI pie chart. Now in this video, we're going to continue and we're going to use another type of visualization, very similar to the pie chart, being the Material UI donut chart. And in the end, it's going to look something like this. We're going to get the quantities per gender from our database data and visualize it inside of a donut chart with the total value in the middle. And also apply the similar styling that when we select a certain part of the pie, it gets highlighted. Now to implement the donut chart, we're going to be adding 6 main steps. We're going to start by adding a Material UI donut chart to our project and then create a new Backend API to get our database data available through Django. Then we're going to be fetching that database data from our backend so that we have it in our front end and we can pass it to our chart. And as the last steps, we're going to add a total label in the middle of the donut chart and also apply some general styling. So let's get started and add the donut chart code to our project. So right now I'm in the documentation of Material UI XCharts. And if you go to the category of pie and then to the demos, you have various use cases that demonstrate the pie charts that they offer. Now, if we scroll down a little bit, you can see that there are some examples present which show the charts with a hole in the middle. And if we go even further, we also have a variation where you can use a center label to actually display some data. And that is exactly what we are looking for our tutorial. So for this example, I'm going to be expanding the code, make sure that it's on JavaScript and copy over the source of this visual. Then we're going to go to our project and in there, we're going to go to the Frontend folder, source and then components. And we're going to add a new file in the charts folder. And in here, I'm going to call that donutchart.jsx. Now in here, we can just paste the full code from Material UI. And we are just going to make one change. I'm going to be calling this my donut chart. And let's save this. Now let's go through the code and quickly see what is happening here. Now at the top you can see that they're using a hard-coded constant of data to pass some data to the chart. And they also define the width and the height of the chart through a constant called size. And underneath the size we see another constant for styled text. And I assume that that is the place where the centered label in the middle is actually being styled. Then we see a function of pie center label. And this is actually a component that's been created to determine where the center label is actually being placed. So it's using the width and the height that has been put in the size constant right here and is doing some calculations on where the label needs to be exactly. And then everything that's inside of this component is going to be put there. Now, as a last step, you can see that it actually exports a function that we just called my donut chart. And in here we have the pie chart block, similarly to what we had in our previous video. But now we also have the pie center label, which originates from this function. And in there, it specifies a center label. So that's how this piece of code works. So for now, I'm just going to add this donut chart to our dashboard 1 page and have it visualized there as is. And then we're going to fetch some data and actually populate it with our own data. So we're going to go to the dashboard 1, the JSX page. And on the top, we're going to be importing my donut chart from charts/donut charts. And then we can add it to our chart box. Now in the previous video, we've created this chart box, which takes in arguments for 3 different charts to be displayed on our page. So similarly to the last video, we can just go to the dashboard 1 page, copy over the icon, the title and the chart and replace it with the chart that we have just created. So in the chart box, we just need to change the icon to icon 2, the title to title 2 and the chart to the chart 2. And the chart is going to be the my donut chart. And we are going to get rid of the props because we don't have any props at the moment. Now what we want to visualize here is the quantities per gender. So I'm going to change the title to per gender. And then we also need a new icon so it's not the same as before. So in the Material UI documentation, we're going to be looking again for material icons. And in there, I can just get a new one, and let's just search for icons related to gender. And then we can get this toilet icon or WC icon and just put it in our project. So on the top, we import that icon that we have just copied. And then we can say that the icon 2 is going to be this icon. Now to check out the result, we need to start our server. So in the terminal, we're first going to be starting our backend server by doing cd into our backend. And then starting the virtual environment with venv/scripts/activate. And then do python manage.py run server. And then we can do the same for our front end by clicking on the plus to open another terminal. And then we just cd into our front end folder and started with doing npm run dev. And let's check out the result in our localhost 5173. So it has now started, and you can see that next to the quantities per branch, we now have the quantities per gender with just the example copied over from Material UI. Now, as a next step, we're going to be creating a new API in our backend so that we have the data available that we want to put inside of this visual. So we're back in our code right now. And as I just explained, we want to have the quantities, but this time per the gender field. So we can go to our backend and go to data and then to our views.py file and basically create a new view, a new URL, and a new serializer to get the data that we need. Now, it is actually very similar to what we did in the previous video. So I'm going to copy over the complete view set for the branch data. And then we're just going to be calling it our gender data view set. So in here, the majority of the information is going to remain the same. We will have the same permission class because anyone can access it at the moment. That's fine for our application. And the main query set that we're going to use is still coming from our supermarket sales model. And if you recall correctly, what we have in there is the unit price, the quantity, and a date, and then different dimensions. Now, what we want to get from that in our list is the gender field with the name specified in the foreign key table. And then we will also like to have the quantity field as a value field. So inside of our views, we're going to be slightly changing the list variable. So we can get rid of the total sum and the total quantity because that's not really what we're after in this video. What we're just going to be doing is do supermarket.objects.sales. And then we don't want to get the branch column, but we want to get the gender column and also the gender __ name. And the gender column is going to point towards our supermarket sales model and the gender foreign key field that we have over there. And when we do gender __ name, we actually refer to the name column in our foreign key table. So that's how we actually get the value or the text value that we want. Okay, now for the quantity, we still want to get the sum of the field of quantity from our supermarket sales model, but we're not going to do any fancy things with percentages. So the rest of this can just go. And just like this, our view is actually done. Now, the thing that we need to change is our serializer, because currently it expects the branch fields and the percentage fields, but we're not going to serialize that data. We just want to have the gender field being called the ID field. The gender __ name is going to be referring as the label. And then we have the quantity as the value. So let's save this for now and go to our serializer.py field and create the correct serializer. So we can copy over our branch data serializer from the previous video. And in there, we're just going to be calling this the gender data serializer. Now the ID field is going to be populated by the source of gender. And the label is going to be populated by the field called gender __ name. Now the value will still come from the quantity field that we also have inside of our view. And the percentage field can actually be deleted because we are not going to be using that. And just like that, our serializer is complete. So now we can copy over the name and pass in the gender data serializer in our serializer class. And if we now save this, we have the view complete that is going to get the right data and serialize it to our frontend. The last thing that we're now missing is a URL where we can find that data. So we can go to our urls.py file, copy over the branch data route that we created in the previous video, but now we can just call this the gender data. And then we can say that the gender data comes from the gender data view set, and also that the base name is going to be gender data. And let's now check out the results in our backend URL. Okay, and if we now open the localhost 8000, you can see that we have a new link here for the gender data. And if we open it, you can see that we have two rows which display the value of the male category and the value of the female category. So this seems to be working just fine. Now, the next step is getting this data into our front end. Now, that is quite easy because in the two previous videos, we've already created all of the logic for fetching data. So now we can just go to our dashboard1.jsx file and do something very similar as what we did previously. So in here, we already have the constant that contain the branch data and the setMyBranch data. And now we're going to copy this one over, paste it, and we're going to say now that we also want to store the my gender data and then have the setMyGender data. And the setMyGender data is going to populate the gender data. Now we can also already say that we want to log this. So we say my data again, and we want to log the my gender data to check later on if we actually see the data. And now in this constant for getting the data, we have the Axios instance.get for the branch data, but we can just copy this one over and paste it in here. And now say that we also want to fetch the gender data. And in there, we use the same URL as what we listed down inside of the urls.py file. Now, we don't want to store that data in the setMyBranch data, but we're going to be using setMyGender data to pass in the results of this get statement into this constant right here. And that should get us the right data. So let's save this right now and go to our front end to see if we have the data in the console. So we're now in our front end, and if I refresh this page and then do inspect, we should see the new data in our console. And you can indeed see that we have an array of two rows which display the data for male and female inside of our console. So this is working just fine. And that means that we can start the fourth step of this video, which is passing the data to our chart so that we actually see our database data in this visual right here. So back in the code again, and the step we need to take to pass the data to our chart is first making a change to our donut chart.jsx file. Now in here, you can see that I currently populate the visual with the constant of data right here. Now we actually don't want that because we're going to pass in our own data. So we can just delete this for now. Then we can scroll down a little bit, and in here you can see that it expects that data is being passed inside this chart. But currently there's nothing called data which is going to do that. So we can say inside of my donut chart that we expect a prop, and that prop is going to be called data. And let's save this. And now in our dashboard1.jsx page, we can scroll down and then say into the donut chart that the data that it expects to see is going to be equal to the gender data that we have just created right here, because this is where the data is stored in. So we can copy over my gender data and save it. And now when we return to our front end, you can see that the data is actually the data that we just fetched. And the reason that this works out of the box, which we also discussed in the previous video, is that in our serializer, we put the data exactly in the format that the chart expects. So the MUI charts always expect a label, a value, and an ID. And the reason that I can just pass in the data is because it's already in the correct format. Now, if we take a look at this chart, you can see that we still have the center label being mentioned right here. But what I actually want is the total value of both the female and the male categories to be displayed right here as the total sum. So we're going to be changing the way that this looks. Because in our code right now, we can see that in the donut chart, we just have a hard-coded value for center label, but we're going to be replacing that with a prop similarly to the data one, and we're going to be calling this center label. And now I can copy over that value and say that this function expects us to also deliver the center label through the dashboard1 page. So now if I go to our dashboard one, I can just add another prop for center label in here. And I can say, for example, that is equal to AAA. And now when we return it, you can see that it actually has the value of AAA. Now, of course, we want to get the total sum of this, and we can establish that quite easily. To do that, we can go to this center label, and we're going to add in a little bit of a function that is going to calculate the total sum of the quantity column inside of the my gender data. So we started by saying my gender data, and then we do dot reduce. So we're going to use a reduce function. And in there, we do 2 times the round brackets. And in this round bracket, we define sum and then a comma, and then we say data. And after that, we're doing an arrow function, which is going to do sum plus data dot value, and then a comma, and then we do a 0. And when we now get back to our front end, we see that we get the total sum of the two categories combined together. Now let's briefly explain this function. What it does, it is going to take a look at the my gender data, which holds the label of male or female and then the quantity. And then we use a reduce function, which is going to loop over each of the rows inside of my gender data. And what this reduce function does is very simple. It has the variable of the total sum, which is the result of each of the iterations of the loop, and then is going to add the data. And data is equal to the current row that it's processing. And for each of these rows, it's going to do the total sum that we have, and then plus that by the data.value. And the value is the column where we actually store the quantity. So it's going to loop over each row and add the value of that row to a variable called sum. And by adding the value over and over again, we in the end arrive at the total quantity. Now the reason that we define the 0 is because that's going to be our starting point. So the sum variable starts with a 0, and then for each row it's going to add the quantity until we end up with the final sum. Now as a last step, we also want to add some styling to our donut chart, just so it has some of the similar attributes that we see in the quantities per branch. Now the first thing that we're going to do is make sure that this circle is a little bit less small. To change that, we can go to the donut chart and we can say that the inner radius is going to be a little bit smaller. So let's say that we put it on 40, and then we can see that the circle becomes way smaller. Now actually I don't really like it to be this thick, so we're going to go back and there say that we want to see it on 50. And for the moment that looks just fine. Now, I also would like to add some of the data labels to this chart, and also the interaction that when you hover over it, it just focuses on the different things that you select. So to do that, we are going to go back to our code again and just copy over those styling elements that we added in the last video. So for the labels, we can copy over the arc label and go to our donut chart, and in this pie chart thing also display that one. So we can go open up the series, and next to the data and the inner radius, we are also going to place in the arc label, and don't forget the comma. Now in the last video, we did the item.percentage and displayed it like that, but we don't have a percentage right here. So we're going to take a look at the item.value and remove the percentage sign. And that looks something like this. Now, I think that these ones are quite big, and also it doesn't match the white color that we have right here. So to make sure that it is all formatted correctly, we can go back to the pie chart, copy over the class that we import at the top, because that's what we need to apply some styling to the classes of the chart. And then we're going to go back to the donut chart and also put that in the import for the pie chart. And then we can just copy over the complete styling element of SX and put that in here as well, and put that outside of the series so we can put it right there. Now in here, it fills it with a white color and puts the font size at 14, but I'm going to make it a little bit smaller to 12 because we don't have that much space to work with. And in the end, it looks like this. Now we can also add that interaction element by going to the pie chart and in there define that we want to copy over the highlight scope and the faded. And then we can add that to our donut chart as well. And that needs to be inside of the series as well. So make sure that you put it inside of this part. And now when we hover over the different parts, you can see that it gets highlighted for our users. And that is actually all that we want to cover for today. In this video, I showed you how you can add a donut chart with the value in the middle to your React.js project. In the next video, we're going to be continuing and we're going to be adding a stacked bar chart in the last remaining spot right here, so that we also have some experience with creating the different types of bar charts. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.